I still remember the exact words my son said to me that day. "Dad, I don't want you in my life anymore. Don't call me, don't text me, and don't try to show up. Just don't contact me again." For a moment, I thought he was joking. I even laughed nervously, waiting for him to smile, to say, "Relax, Dad, I didn't mean it." But no smile came. His eyes were cold. His voice didn't shake. And that was the moment I realized he meant it. Now pause right there. Imagine hearing that from your own child. The same child you raised, the same child you carried on your shoulders, the same child you taught how to ride a bike. And suddenly one day, he looks you in the eye and says, "Never contact me again." Would you crumble? Would you fight? Or would you do what I did? Because let me tell you, what I did after that is something my son will never forget for the rest of his life. At first, I couldn't move. His words hit me like a truck. My hands were shaking, my throat was dry, and all I could manage to say was, "Son, you don't mean that, do you?" He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, arms crossed, his jaw tight. "I do mean it, Dad. I don't want you in my life. Now, listen, I wasn't the perfect father. No one is, but I worked hard. I sacrificed, I struggled, I put food on the table, I made sure he had opportunities I never had. And now this rejection, it felt like someone had ripped out my heart and stomped on it. But instead of yelling, I just whispered, 'Okay, if that's what you want,' and I walked away. But here's the thing, those words didn't leave me. They echoed in my mind every single night. Lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept hearing it again and again. Don't contact me again. And let me tell you something. If you're a parent, you'll understand this. No matter how old your child gets, you never stop being their parent. You never stop caring. You never stop worrying. So even though he said he didn't want me in his life, I couldn't just erase him from mine. Now, before I tell you what I did, the thing he'll never forget, you need to understand how we got here. Because stories like this don't happen overnight. They build up piece by piece, mistake by mistake, silence by silence, until one day it explodes. So let me take you back. My son, Michael, or Mike as everyone calls him, was always a bright kid. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he had this spark. As a little boy, he'd ask me questions about everything. "Dad, why is the sky blue? Dad, how do planes fly? Dad, do you think I could be an astronaut one day?" And every time I'd smile and answer the best I could. Sometimes I made things up just to see him laugh. I thought we had a bond that couldn't be broken, but somewhere along the line, cracks started to show. When his mother and I divorced, Mike was only 14. And let me tell you, divorce does something to a family. No matter how amicable you try to make it, kids feel it. They feel the tension, the distance, the unspoken words. Mike went to live primarily with his mom, and I got weekends. At first, it was fine. We'd play basketball, go fishing, or just watch movies together. But slowly, weekends turned into excuses. "Sorry, Dad, I've got plans with friends. Sorry, I've got homework." And eventually, it was just silence. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't blame him for wanting a life. Teenagers need their space. But a part of me always wondered, did I do something wrong? Did the divorce make him see me as the bad guy? Fast forward a few years, and Mike became a man. He got married, built a life of his own. I thought, finally, maybe things will get better. But instead, they got worse. Phone calls went unanswered. Texts were left on read. And when I finally showed up at his house one day just to check in, he opened the door, looked me in the eye, and said those words that changed everything. "Don't contact me again." Now, here's a micro hook for you, because I know what you're thinking right now. Why? Why would a son push his father away like that? Was I abusive? No. Did I abandon him? No. Did I betray him? No. So what happened? Well, let's just say, the truth is far more complicated than it looks, and it involves secrets, family secrets, ones that I didn't even know existed until it was too late. But before I reveal that, let's talk about what I did next. Because I didn't just sit back and cry. I made a decision that would send shockwaves through his life. See, when you push someone out of your life, you expect them to fade away. But me, I wasn't going to fade away quietly. I wanted my son to feel something. Maybe not love, maybe not forgiveness, but something. Because silence? That's worse than hate. So I came up with a plan. And let me tell you, it was bold, it was risky, and it was unforgettable. But before I explain it, I have to go back even further, because if I don't, none of this will make sense. Mike was about 8 years old when I made him a promise. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and he asked me, "Dad, will you always be there for me?" And without hesitation I said, "Always." No matter what, but life has a cruel sense of humor. Because sometimes, even when you're there, people don't see it. Sometimes they convince themselves you weren't there enough. I remember one birthday, his 18th, I showed up at his mom's place with a gift. Nothing fancy, just something I thought he'd love. A vintage guitar. He'd been talking about wanting one for months. But when I handed it to him, he didn't smile. He just looked at me and said, "Thanks, but I don't need this." That was the first time I felt him slipping away for real. And from then on, every little interaction became heavier, more distant, more strained. So when he finally said, "Don't contact me again," maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was, because deep down I still believed we could fix it. Now, let me pause here. Because if you're watching this, you're probably wondering, what did I do? What was this unforgettable thing? And don't worry, I'll get there. But I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to understand why my choice mattered, because sometimes it's not just about what you do. It's about why you do it, and for me, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger, it was something else, by the way. If you've made it this far, I know you're hooked. So stick with me, because the next part of this story, well, let's just say it changes everything, because when I finally decided to act, I uncovered a secret about my son, and about myself, that I never saw coming. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this. You know, when my son told me never to contact him again, I thought the pain couldn't get any worse. But I was wrong, because what came after was even harder to swallow. The night after he shut the door on me, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the old photo albums. Pictures of me and him, fishing, playing ball, laughing. Memories frozen in time, mocking me. And I kept asking myself, how did we end up here? But then, a thought struck me. What if the reason he pushed me away had nothing to do with me at all? What if there was something I didn't know? And let me tell you, that thought ate at me like a disease. So the next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called his mother. Now let me tell you, calling my ex-wife isn't exactly a pleasant experience. Our divorce wasn't messy, but it wasn't sweet either. We tolerated each other for Mike's sake, but once he grew up, the communication dried up. Still, I dialed her number. When she picked up, her voice was cautious. "Hello?" "It's me," I said quietly. "I need to talk about Mike." There was a pause, then a sigh. "What about him?" I swallowed hard. "He told me never to contact him again. I need to know why." Now here's a micro hook for you. I was expecting her to laugh at me, to say something cold like, "Well, maybe you should have been a better father." But instead, she went silent, completely silent. That silence told me something. It told me she knew something I didn't. Finally, she said, "Maybe it's better if you don't know, and let me tell you." Those words, they lit a fire inside me, because when someone says you don't need to know, you have to know. I pressed harder. "Tell me." "I deserve to know," she sighed again. "Look, I think Mike resents you for more than just the divorce. There are things he believes, things he's convinced himself of, and I don't think I can change his mind anymore." "What kind of things?" I demanded, her voice lowered, like she didn't even want to say it out loud. "He thinks you weren't there for him, that you chose work or your own life over him, and he thinks you lied to him about something important." Now wait a second. Lied? I didn't lie to my son about anything. At least, not intentionally. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She didn't answer. And before I could push her, she hung up. Now imagine being in my shoes. Your son has cut you out of his life. Your ex-wife hints at secrets, and suddenly your whole reality starts to crumble. I felt like I was losing my grip on everything. But here's the thing about me. I don't give up easily. If there were secrets, I was going to find them. And that's when I started digging. I went through old letters, old files, anything I could get my hands on. I even called up relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. And little by little, a picture started forming. See, back when Mike was a kid, there was an incident. Something I thought was small, something I thought he'd forget, but he didn't. When he was about 10 years old, there was a school play. He was supposed to be the lead role, and he begged me to come watch. But that same night, I had a critical business meeting, one I couldn't skip. I told him I'd try. I promised him I'd make it, but I didn't. I showed up late, after it was over, and do you know what I saw? Mike standing outside, still in costume, holding his little script in his hands, his eyes filled with tears. I remember kneeling down, apologizing, telling him I'd make it up to him. And at the time, he nodded. He even hugged me. But deep down, maybe he never forgave me, and that was just one moment. There were others, baseball games, birthdays, parent-teacher nights, times when I thought he'll understand, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he was keeping score all along. Now let me stop here for a second, because if you're a parent watching this, you probably know what I'm talking about. You think you're doing the right thing, balancing work and family. But sometimes kids don't see the balance. They only see what you missed, and those little misses? They add up, until one day they explode into, "Don't ever contact me again." But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Because as I dug deeper, I realized there was more than just missed moments. There was a misunderstanding, a massive one. Apparently, Mike had grown up believing something about me that wasn't true, and this belief poisoned him against me. What was it? Well, let me tell you, but not just yet. Because the moment I found out, everything changed. Before I reveal that, let me jump back to the night after my call with my ex-wife. I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the floor, replaying everything in my head. And then a crazy idea came to me. If Mike didn't want me in his life, fine. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I was going to remind him, in a way he'd never forget, who I was and what I meant to him. And so, the plan began. I started writing a letter, not just any letter. This was going to be the most honest, raw, unfiltered thing I had ever written in my life. I wrote about my childhood, my struggles, my mistakes. I wrote about the nights I stayed up worrying about bills, the mornings I woke up early just to make sure he had breakfast. I wrote about the times I failed and the times I tried to do better. And most importantly, I wrote about him, about the day he was born and how I cried like a baby myself, about the first time he called me Dad, about the pride I felt watching him grow into a man. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession, a declaration, a legacy. But here's the hook. I didn't send it. Not yet, because I wanted him to feel the weight of it. I wanted the timing to be unforgettable. And when I finally delivered it, well, let's just say it shook him to his core. Now, before I get ahead of myself, let me circle back to that misunderstanding I mentioned earlier. Because this was the key to everything. Remember how my ex-wife said Mike believed I lied to him about something? Well, here it is. Mike grew up believing that I left him for another family. That when the divorce happened, I didn't just split from his mom, I started a whole new life and replaced him. And the heartbreaking part? He truly believed it. When I found this out, I nearly collapsed. Because it wasn't true. Not even close. Yes, I dated again after the divorce. Yes, I tried to move on, but I never replaced him. I could never replace him, but in his mind, every new woman, every new friendship, every new photo without him in it, it was proof. Proof that his dad had moved on and left him behind. And once a belief like that takes root in your heart, it's almost impossible to shake. That's when I realized this wasn't just about missed birthdays or broken promises. This was about a story my son told himself. A story where I was the villain, and the worst part? I didn't even know he was telling it. Now, here's the micro hook. How do you fight a story? How do you rewrite the version of yourself that lives in someone else's mind? That was the question. And the answer? Well, it led me to do the one thing he'll never forget. When I discovered that my son believed I had replaced him with another family, something inside me broke. Because no matter what mistakes I had made, I never stopped being his father. But how do you prove that to someone who's convinced otherwise? How do you fight a story that's already written in their head? That night, as I stared at the letter I had written, I realized something. Words might not be enough. I needed to show him. I needed to remind him in a way that cut through all the lies, all the resentment, all the walls he had built around his heart. And that's when the idea came. It started with a box. I went into the attic and pulled down an old cardboard box that had been gathering dust for years. Inside were artifacts of our life together. The baseball glove I bought him when he was 8. His first school drawing of me, a stick figure with messy hair and a big smile. A paper crown he made me for Father's Day that said, "King Dad." Each item was a memory. Each item was proof. And I thought maybe if he sees this, he'll remember who I really was, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted this to be unforgettable. So I didn't just pack up the box and send it. No. I decided to create something bigger. A story. His story. Our story. I spent nights digging through everything I had, photos, home videos, letters, and I started piecing them together into a timeline. The day he was born, his first steps, the day I taught him to ride a bike, the moments we laughed so hard our stomachs hurt. I wasn't just collecting memories. I was building a case that proved beyond any doubt that he was, and always had been, the center of my world. But here's the hook. I didn't want to just hand it to him. I wanted him to feel it, to live it again. So I came up with an idea that some would call crazy. I decided to surprise him on his birthday. Now, let me pause here, because if you're watching this, you're probably thinking, wait, didn't he say his son told him to never contact him again? Isn't showing up on his birthday the worst idea possible? And you're right. It could have been a disaster, but sometimes you take the risk, because some things are worth risking everything for. So the plan was set. I'd gather the box of memories. I'd prepare the letter, and I'd create something else. Something that would shatter his belief that I'd ever replaced him. That something else? Well, let me explain. Years ago, I started a savings account. Not for me, not for retirement. For him, every month, no matter how tight things got, I put a little away. Some months it was 100. Some months it was 10. But over the years it grew, and I never touched it. Not once, because it wasn't mine. It was his, that account. It became my silent promise to him. A promise that no matter what, I'd always be thinking of his future. And now I decided to reveal it, not as money, but as proof that I had never, not for a single day, stopped caring about him. So here was the plan. Deliver the box of memories. Include the letter, raw, honest, unfiltered. Reveal the savings account. Show up on his birthday, not to demand forgiveness, not to argue, but simply to give. No speeches, no excuses, just the truth. But of course, life has a way of testing you. Because just a week before his birthday, I got a call that nearly derailed everything. It was from a friend of his, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. And what she told me stopped me cold. "Mike doesn't just resent you," she said. "He's angry in ways you can't imagine. He thinks you abandoned him, and he's convinced you'll ruin his life if you come back into it. If you show up, he might slam the door again. He might never even open it." Now imagine hearing that. Your son, your flesh and blood, sees you as a threat to his happiness. For a moment, I thought about backing out. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should let him go, let him live in peace without me. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he was little. That pure trust, that love, and I knew I couldn't walk away. Not this time, so I doubled down. I worked day and night on the memory box, the timeline, the letter, and when the day finally came, I packed everything into my car and drove to his house. Now here's the microhook. When I pulled up outside, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel, because on the driveway, there were already cars parked, family, friends, a birthday party, which meant this wasn't just going to be me and him. It was going to be me, him, and an audience. And let me tell you, that made everything 10 times harder. I grabbed the box. I walked up to the front door. My heart was pounding like a drum. And when I knocked, the door opened, and there he was. My son, older, harder, but still my boy. He froze when he saw me. His face went pale. "Dad, what are you doing here?" In that moment, 1,000 words rushed to my tongue. But I swallowed them all, because this wasn't about speeches. This was about truth. I held out the box. "Happy birthday, son." He didn't take it. In fact, his hands curled into fists. "I told you not to come here." I nodded. "I know. And if you want me to leave after this, I will. But first, just open this." He stared at the box like it was poison. And for a moment, I thought he was going to slam the door in my face. But then, something shifted. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something deeper. He took the box. As he opened it, I watched his face change. The baseball glove. The paper crown, the old drawings. One by one he pulled them out. And with each one his hands trembled more. Finally he found the letter. He didn't read it right there, not in front of everyone, but he held it like it weighed 100 pounds. And that's when I said the last part. There's one more thing. Something I've kept for you all these years. I handed him the envelope with the savings account details. His eyes widened. What is this? It's yours, I said simply. It's always been yours. Now I wish I could tell you he broke down right there. That he hugged me and forgave me in front of everyone. But that's not what happened. He just stood there, silent, his jaw tight, his eyes glassy. And then he whispered, "Why now?" That question cut me deeper than any knife. Because the answer was simple. Because I was too late. And before I could even say it out loud, someone from inside called his name. He turned, stepped back, and closed the door. Just like that. But here's the hook, and here's why this story isn't over. Because later that night, my phone buzzed. It was a message. From him, and what he wrote. It was only 5 words. But those 5 words changed everything. That night when my phone buzzed, I almost didn't look at it. Because after the door had closed in my face, I felt like everything I had done, the box, the letter, the savings, had been wasted. But then I saw the message. It was from my son, 5 words. Just 5 words. Can we talk tomorrow? Alone? My hand shook as I read them. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't shutting me out. He wasn't saying never. He was saying tomorrow. And that was enough. Enough to keep me awake all night. Enough to make my heart pound like it hadn't in decades. The next morning, I drove to the park where we used to play catch. And there he was, standing near the old oak tree, the one he used to climb as a kid. He looked nervous, but he stayed. And that in itself was a miracle. For a moment, we just stood there, silent. And then he said, almost in a whisper, "Why did you really come back?" I took a deep breath. Because I couldn't let the last words between us be hate. Because you're my son. And no matter how much you push me away, I'll never stop being your father. He looked away, blinking hard. You don't get it. I spent years thinking you forgot me, that you had a new life, a better life. Without me, I stepped closer, my voice breaking. Mike, I never replaced you. I couldn't. The savings account, the memories, they weren't just for proof. They were my way of holding on, even when you were gone. Now, here's the micro hook. Because at that moment, something inside him cracked. His shoulders sagged. His voice trembled. I hated you for so long, Dad, but I missed you even more. And just like that, he broke. Tears spilled down his face. And after all the years, all the silence, all the anger, he stepped forward and hugged me. I can't describe what that felt like. It was like breathing again after drowning, like coming home after being lost for years. For the first time in forever, I held my son, and he held me back. But here's the unforgettable part. Because what I did next wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. I pulled out one last envelope. Inside wasn't money or memories. It was something else. Adoption papers. You see, Mike's wife had a little boy, my grandson, and I had quietly arranged to start the process of becoming his legal guardian if anything ever happened to them. Not because I wanted to take over, but because I wanted Mike to know one thing. I'm not just showing up for the memories, son. I'm here for the future too. Yours, his, ours. He stared at the papers, stunned. Then he laughed through his tears. You're crazy, Dad, but maybe that's what I needed to see, that you're not going anywhere this time. And that's when he said the words I thought I'd never hear again. Come over tonight. Meet everyone properly. No more closed doors. So I did. That evening I walked back into his house, not as a ghost from his past, not as a mistake to be erased, but as a father, a grandfather, a part of the family again. Now, I won't lie. It wasn't perfect. Forgiveness isn't instant. Healing takes time. But that night, as I sat at the dinner table with my son, his wife, and their child, I realized something. Sometimes when someone tells you to never contact them again, what they really mean is, don't give up on me. Prove to me you still care, and that's exactly what I did. Something unforgettable. And if you're watching this right now, wondering if you should reach out to someone who's pushed you away, maybe this is your sign. Because sometimes the door isn't locked. It's just waiting for you to knock one more time.